Info. I am your host, Hamptonio. What you do for yourself depends on what you think of yourself. What you think of yourself depends on what you know of yourself. And what you know of yourself depends on what you've been told of yourself. That is the question. What have you been told about yourself so you would know yourself? That is the question. Yes, we got a great show for you today. We got a good brother that's in our green room, as you can say, in our studio, and we're gonna be chopping it up, having a good conversation with the good brother. We gonna let this conversation go where it wants to go. He's a medical doctor as well, just like our good brother Dr. Brown. I'm gonna ask him some couple medical questions about being in that particular field, how he kind of looks at it versus some homeopathy type of medicine, and then we might get into this whole thing about what's going over in Africa, what's going over here as well, and to see what's on his mind as well. But in the remote studio, we got our good brother Vince. What's going on?
Well, as soon as we finish this broadcast, your brother is headed to Detroit for the Detroit International Jazz Festival.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be phenomenal. I can't wait to get there. But until then, we have some important business to attend to right here in Cleveland. And as you indicated, we have a phenomenal guest for us today. Burnett William Gallman Jr. is an accomplished physician. He spent his life sharing knowledge with his community. He's also an avid music lover and performer. He's a native of Hartsville, South Carolina, and attended Morehouse College and graduated from Benedict College, where he earned a band scholarship. He graduated from Hahnemann Medical School, now Drexel University College of Medicine, and completed his internship and residency training at the District of Columbia General Hospital in Washington, D.C. He served as chief of internal medicine at both Richland Memorial Hospital and the Baptist Medical Center, both now a part of Palmetto Health in Columbia, South Carolina, and now works at the William Jennings Bryan Dorn Veterans Administration Medical Center, and is in part a part-time private practice as a gastroenterologist. That's a mouthful of words to describe the brother that is with us today, but it gives me a great deal of pleasure and honor to welcome to 360 Info Network, Dr. Burnett Quadwo Gallman. How you doing, bro?
I'm wonderful, man. I'm wonderful. And thank you all so much for having me.
All
Yes, sir.
right.
Well, like I say, it's a pleasure for you to be here, my brother, to spend a little time with us. So
Love chopping it up with
chopping it up a little bit. That's what I'm saying. Spend a little time chopping it up a little bit, Doc. I always was amazed as our good resident doctor, Dr. Brown, as well, that being in the medical field and coming to a level of consciousness that we can all relate to. The black version of us woke people. Okay, I ain't using the white version. They don't stole our consciousness and woke thing now.
it. Yeah,
We can't have nothing. They don't stole that now with some woke, some misrepresentation of what the word woke supposed to mean to us. But anyway, and that always intrigued me about our professionals. You know, actually, because it's hard to break away from um, that institution of independent thinking, because they drill you on, and same go for policemen, lawyers, doctors, they want you to deal with it. They train you like Rockefeller deal with the medical society, to be and deal with a certain streamlined way of doing things. Now, when people start, just like even with religion, when people start looking and thinking out of the box, it becomes a problem. For you to think on your own and have some critical analysis of your own and saying, wait a minute, because I know what Dr. Brown was talking like, wait a minute, what I'm doing is not really helping folks. Maybe there's another way to do this, or maybe I should massage this to a point to where, yeah, I think it helps. Did you ever have that epiphany or come to those thoughts that you should maybe work this out? Because with everything, it's something that I wrote. With everything that I was trained in, I always had to modify it when I brought it back to my people. Because it usually was based on the ideology and worldview and viewpoint of our European brothers. So, but you always had to modify. Do you find yourself doing that too in the medical field?
One of the things my grandmother used to tell me all the time is that there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting that you mentioned that, because, yeah, I have had that epiphany. And it's funny because when I had the epiphany, I had absolutely zero knowledge of anything other than what I had been taught in the traditional Western medical school.
Yes.
And had to go out and seek information. And I'm still seeking, because that epiphany, in terms of the relating it to medical, my medical career, came relatively late, and I kick myself for that, because it should have come sooner. So I'm still trying to do that, but the scientific method that is so touted by Western medicine and Western science doesn't always work, because so often we try to put everybody in one box, and we all react differently. Um, my wife, my wife told me that I should not go off on tangents here. She looked at some of our earlier discussions, and she said, "You went off on a tangent. Stick to the question." But I think that, to answer your question, yes, I have done that, and as a matter of fact, as I learn more about alternative medicine, I'm recommending more. And the medical school I went to actually was a homeopathic medical school, and they only, a few years before I was admitted, they only went into fully went into Western medicine.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, we can talk about that even with, like I said, with other professions, the police, being a lawyer, because, and that's something that, I mean, I pondered over for a lot of years when I was young, and especially when I started getting into so-called consciousness on, saying our professionals got to see that something is wrong here, but we're not doing anything. You know what I mean? Okay, let me give you an example as far as lawyers is concerned. Now, you have to see that a lot of our young brothers are going to jail, and it's due to the fact that they don't have proper representation. They don't have the dollars and cents to afford a good lawyer in order to get them. And by, I guess, justification of that and verification of that, of how many of them is in jail, incarcerated falsely, and getting off. They had evidence, they had witnesses that they could have brought to the case, whatever, but they didn't have the finances in order to get a good attorney to get them out of the situation. How many black folks are just saying that? I just was looking at something. It was something crazy, but I mean, it wasn't crazy, but it was on America's Got Talent. And the one brother came on and said he did 37 years in prison of a murder of some white woman, that just because of DNA, those people to take the files, the dead case files, they got him off. But he spent 37 years. But so we have stuff like that, and you as a lawyer, I know I'll be crying bloody murder. I'll be doing stuff pro bono or whatever, or even we should be getting these grants to at least supplement these lawyers so they can take these cases, so all these brothers wouldn't have to go. And then they threaten them with, if you go to trial with this, they're going to go for 10 years, so you better plead. So you got all our young brothers plea bargaining to these crimes that they could possibly be innocent, and because of the lack of money and resources, they got to deal with it. So I'm saying that seemed like something that we always go through. You got some, Vince? What you saying?
Yeah, I was just going to say that whole paradigm is based on a model that sends us to prison. It's not there to exonerate us for things that we didn't do.
Mm.
It's there to put us in prison so that we can be taken advantage of as legal slaves. So the nature of the system, it's just like if you look at the legal system, you've got the police, you've got the judges, and you got the attorneys, and they all work together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So then you got the public defenders, and the public defenders are there to sabotage these young folk and make sure that they end up in
Yeah.
prison. So it all works together, and that's just the nature of the system. But we're blind to it because we're not properly educated about the nature of the system.
Let me say this real quick, Doc. Let me say what real quick, Doc, because he just made me think about something. When people know what my prior occupation was, so I'm not the police guy, but I remember the first time that I got to go to the courtroom, the back, sitting behind the court, waiting for the judge and all that. And what blew my mind was when the prosecutor came in and the defense attorney came in, they around there chopping it up like, buddies, you know what I mean? And I'm sitting back there, my uniform waiting, and I'm looking and I'm listening to this, and they around there discussing what your fate was gonna be. Well, we could get him on this, or okay, well, he seemed like a nice guy. We'll just get him on that. And this, I said, is this how it's done? I was blown away. Go ahead, Doc.
Even before it goes to trial, the bail system. If you don't have any money, you can't get out of jail on bail.
Yeah.
So that you have people sitting there for the time being. And my wife was in law enforcement, and one of the things that was interesting, there were judges ruled the courtroom. And there was this one judge who came in. He told everybody, "Listen, I have something I got to do this afternoon. So most of y'all going to jail. So let's make this quick." I mean, that's ridiculous.
Wow. I mean, it's you're feeding that system. You know what I mean? Because when we get into privatizing prisons, we get into the labor force that they're still using the chain gang. It's just a version of the chain gang in prison, making money on you. So it's all about these dollars and cents, and it's probably more than I suspect. But I used to get angry with our professionals not blowing the whistle on that stuff. You know what I mean? Why the black ones is going along with this stuff and not saying anything about it? That used to bother me. I don't know.
That I think in that situation, a lot of them are benefiting from it on one hand. Then the others are basically blissfully ignorant, and they can't see the forest for the trees. And it goes back to, you remember the black codes. If you remember what the black codes were when so-called slavery was eliminated with the 14th Amendment, there was an escape clause. And the escape clause was that slavery was illegal except when punishment for a crime.
That's right.
So they created all these black codes and created all these crimes. They actually, even though they played around with the wording, they actually made unemployment a crime.
Right. Yeah.
So what they did was, out of that, they criminalized black people, mostly black men, and put our ancestors to work in chain gangs, work gangs, convict leasing,
coal mine,
all those things, so that they created another form of slavery, much as in down south what they did with sharecropping. So that what they did was they created new methods of enslavement, and that legal, and I think is we would be remiss if we didn't remind everybody who wants to be strictly adherent to the law that the enslavement the rape, the murder of our ancestors was legal back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
It was legal. So, how much respect should we give to the legalities? I think that African people uh, uh, over the millennia have marched to the beat of a more righteous legal system, which is uh, Ma'at, and it hasn't always, excuse me, been called Ma'at, but even in West and Central Africa, those cultures that I've looked at and I've studied have had a code of ethics, a code of behavior that was very, very similar to Ma'at. And for those who may not know, Ma'at was an ancient Kemetic nature or aspect of nature whose it was she was the female wisdom principle, and her principles were truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, order, and reciprocity. And everybody now, I mean, we're human beings. Nobody was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But just think of a society that tried to tell the truth all the time,
Mm-hmm.
tried to be fair and to
Mm-hmm.
invoke justice all the time or as much as possible. So that society would be much. It's not perfect. Again, we're humans, but it would be much better than what's happening now.
Mm-hmm.
And in looking at one of our previous conversations, uh, Brother Vince, we talked about uh, the 42 negative confessions,
Mm-hmm.
or the what we call the affirmations of innocence. And if we really look at that, there was an expectation of goodness. So that when you recited those things, what you were saying is, I have lived up to the expectation of my goodness,
Mm-hmm.
rather than a negative confession. That's to me
Right.
that's almost sick.
Mm-hmm. But see, but the funny thing, Doc, and this is, I talked to my brother about, and and I try to put it out there to to where our listeners can think about it. Now, if you saying, for those who may not know, that was a part of our ancient ancestors and Egyptian, and you could just like you say, you can see that being permeated all over the continent of Africa. Those particular ways of living in life, but specifically in dealing with Kemet or Egypt, when you have the Discovery Channel and things like that talk about the ancient Egyptians, or when they make a film talking about Egypt or Amun Ra, or they try to make them negative and things like that, they never talk about the system of mind and those negative confessions. You know what I mean? I find that very strange, and our audience need to understand that. What are they doing in reference to that? Because when you start talking about religion and stuff like that, our pastors here always seems to demonize what the Egyptians was doing, because when Europeans came down and seen them the different anthropomorphic ways of doing things with the animals and things of that nature, they didn't understand what was going on. So that since they had the narrative of telling, and far as discovering something and writing stuff down, they looked at it all as being negative, and therefore our pastors and our religious set, they look, don't look at those Egyptian folks. That stuff was wild and things of that nature. But I believe if they understood those confessions was all about, and what mod they was they that would give them some breadcrumbs of understanding. What, dog, that's similar to the Ten Commandments. So they maybe wasn't as heathen as our pastor is trying to make them out to be. So I just find it strange that you never hear him talking about that when they talk about Egypt. They never talk about the spiritual system.
Well, the Ten Commandments are 10 of the 42 that we had to live by. And
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
it's
and I'm just saying, I'm just hoping that they were able to make those connections.
well, it's unfortunate and it's criminal to me that so many ministers do know the difference. Now, ignorance is bliss, and there are a lot of folk that just don't know. And I don't necessarily criticize anyone for being ignorant because all ignorance means is you don't know. When you don't know and you don't try to know, that's stupid. That runs into something else. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that we look at ministers. There are too many charlatans in the ministry. And we have charlatans that are in the African centered world too. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, what they do is they prey on the ignorance of people, and people want to believe something, and they give them these false hopes, this false information upon which to base their beliefs. And again, like I said, that happens in religion, but it also happens in our African centered world. And I think that the only way that can be combated is for us to be a committee, of each person be a committee of one to try to find out and read.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's unfortunate that one of the organizations, I do history lectures for an organization called the Majeska Simpkins School, and those lectures are also on YouTube. But what happens is that the majority of people who actually sign up for the school itself are middle-aged people to elders. And in order to try to get to the young people, we have realized that what we have to do is create sound bites, 30-second, uh, 90-second sound bites, because attention spans have profoundly decreased. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's so sad to me because we had our we go back and study and see that right after the end of enslavement, and if you were to go to schools, you would find people in school learning to read as old as in their 50s and 60s. Education was valued. Uh, and now the young folks can read, but they don't read. So that's pretty much the same as can't read. You
Well,
know,
yeah, they don't want to read. That's the real critical
that's it.
issue. They don't want to read. They
That I agree.
they don't want to write either. I heard a teacher talking about the fact that she gave an assignment to her students and they had to write 5 sentences to write a paragraph. And
Mhm.
they wanted to negotiate it down to like 1 or 2 sentences because they were too lazy to write 5 sentences in a paragraph.
Mm.
You know, Doc, I wanted to rewind and um, touch on something that you mentioned earlier, and it was almost this idea of a one size fits all approach to medicine. And when you look at the fact that there are biological differences between those of us who are melanin rich and those of us who are melanin deficient, when they carry out certain medical procedures, they do it based on the physiology of, I'll just say, a white person.
Melanin deficiency.
Right. And
Yeah.
so I'm just wondering what kinds of adjustments that we can make. And I heard you mention that the school kind of backed away from the homeopathic approach and kind of pivoted towards the allopathic approach. But now we're in a place where they're having to consider alternative medicine because people are using those methods and getting results and they want to keep the business. So they'll bring you to the Cleveland Clinic and maybe connect you with someone who deals with internal medicine or something that might be on the alternative side. So, do you
Functional
see
doctor. Mhm.
do you see anything moving towards maybe more implementation of alternative medicine, knowing that this alternative medicine might provide somebody with something that won't require them to be treated for the rest of their life, because that's the allopathic process?
The short answer is yes. Um, you find that the medical societies are increasingly recognizing uh, alternative medicine. They call it complementary medicine. And that recognition actually is growing. So the short answer is yes. Um, but it's so interesting that we as African people tend to see things in a circular way. We try to see the right and the left brain. We do try to be objective, but we're also subjective. Um, but one of the flaws, I think, of the Western way of thinking is that they try to objectify everything, and it's really interesting. I went to we had a grand rounds on yesterday at the VA, and we had this young woman presenting on compassion. Now, it seems to me that compassion is something that our parents should set the stage for, and it's something that we should have anyway. But she went through all this objectification of compassion, and it was a very interesting lecture. It was enlightening, but at the same time, it's stuff that I think that I instinctively knew.
I
So
knew you was
whenever
gonna
she
say.
would ask a question, and people would be stumbling, and I'd say da 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 da, and the acting chief would say, "Yeah, that's right. I agree with him." The fact that had to be objectified. You objectify compassion.
Mm,
My goodness. So
mm,
um, I think
mm.
that on one hand, it's sad that's happening, but on the other hand, I'm glad that they are recognizing that there is such a thing as compassion,
Okay. Okay.
and recognizing that compassion is important in the
Mhm.
overall scheme of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
Well, it's
think.
interesting that you would say that, because when you look at the way historically we've been treated, women, black women being treated differently than white women, black men being the subject of experimentation, where's the compassion in that?
there was none, and that I guess that's why they have to teach it. I guess that's
Mhm.
now if you wanted to get into a history of medicine, I call it slave medicine. In some history books, they call it plantation medicine. But you talk about these doctors that experimented there, and I don't want to call his name, but there was a native South Carolina doctor who ended up practicing in New York, who is called the father of gynecology, who developed some very, very important surgical procedures, experimenting surgically on enslaved black women. Um, we have four names of women that he experimented on, but there are many, many more without anesthesia.
Mm, mm,
And
mm,
in South Carolina, on the northwestern corner of the state house grounds, they have erected this shrine to this rascal.
mm.
And it's I talk about that in one of my lectures, and I've taken pictures of him. But He is celebrated. He is a past president of the American Medical Association, the AMA, and he is celebrated as the father of gynecology. You had another guy who was based in Louisiana. Again, I won't call his name. Well, I call his name. His name was Cartwright. Cartwright actually created diseases that were unique to Black people.
Mm.
One of the most famous, and you may have heard it, I think my brilliant young homeboy Michael Harriot had a podcast with the name. He called it Drapetomania. I call it Drapetomania, but tomato. And basically, what Drapetomania was a disorder unique to enslaved people who wanted to be free. So the desire for freedom was a disorder, was a disease, and the treatment was whipping.
Yeah, that's the treatment, huh?
The treatment was whipping. But get this: the treatment and the prevention was whipping.
That's that escape genes or something that they want to create.
He also came up with another dysesthesia Ethiopia. And basically what that was, a disease that was unique in free Blacks. And again, let me put a brief disclaimer to quote my brother, who is now an ancestor, Joe Benton. We ain't never been free. We were loose.
Yeah. What you say we was loose?
We were loose. But
Right.
dysesthesia Ethiopia was a disease of so-called free Black folk that made them want to steal and made it didn't matter that they were forced into poverty and they had to try to provide for their families, but they call it rascality.
Yeah. And see, here's the thing too, Doc. When we're dealing with consciousness, kind of pivoting and shifting a little bit, because when you say that, it makes me think about the mentality of the people that you're talking about and dealing with, with that. Look at the stuff that's going over in Gaza and even over in Africa. Where people now is this all about money or what? On how they treat people the way they do, and they will create a narrative that sounds, it works in their favor to try to pass amongst the people to convince them that they are actually doing the right thing and is okay, and let's say Hamas over there. Now, if you know anything about what was going over there, how they've been backed against, the sea, and they had to come and go. They've been treated horrible for years, and they actually, when a person say, "I'm tired of it," and say, "I don't want to," I'm tired of being treated like with slavery. When you talked about, want to run or want to leave or any of those things, you got some people looking at you like something is wrong with you. Like something's wrong with you. Is something wrong with Abraham Traore and want to feed his baby, want to be free and not to be dependent on somebody? That's something's wrong with that thinking, So you think Hamas will want to be treated like that the rest of their lives, and not say, "Hey, I ain't taking this no more. We ain't gonna go down like that. You don't kill people. You don't did this. You don't kill my family, and I'm never gonna do anything." And so they put this narrative out there like they radical, something wrong with them, like you say, this is an illness now. It's an illness that you want to be free. I'm saying, dude, what is wrong with you? I don't have the right to feed my babies. I don't want to be free. I'm tired. Lights is off, electricity going off, and at 9 o'clock, we don't got electricity. Villages don't have water. So I'm just saying, hey, I don't want to live like that no more. We being exploited. I want to be, just live sensibly. But some people got a problem with that.
To add to what you're saying, Brother Hamptonio, there's a label called Black Identity Extremist.
Mhm.
And it's applied to those of us who have a certain sensibility about our own liberation. They put that
Mm.
label on us as if to say that we have a mental disorder because we want to be self-sufficient and sovereign like Ibrahim Traore in Burkina
It's
Faso.
crazy. It's
So
crazy.
now we sick
Yeah.
because we don't want to continue to suffer from Stockholm syndrome. Doc, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree. I think Western civilization is sick, and basically is based in values. Um, Sometimes I'm accused of being too academic, but Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, who is actually the father of chematology, he's the one that proved that the ancient Egyptians were indeed black people, which is something they're fighting against again.
Mhm.
But he developed a theory that he called the two cradle theory. And the two cradle theory merely says that even though we know that all human beings evolved from Africans, when Africans moved into what is now called Europe and Asia, they were caught up there over the thousands of years of the last ice age. It was called I think the official name for the last ice age is the worm, WURM, interglacial, and and that lasted hundreds of thousands of years. I think maybe 240,000 years, but they were caught up there. So during that period of time, they went through mutations, and those mutations account for what we now call race. And that's a whole nother conversation too that I'd like to get to. But during that period of time, based on certain chemical processes in our body, vitamin D interacting with the ultraviolet light from the sun and so forth, they became depigmented. And we were earlier saying melanin deficient, but it was an adaptation, a a mutative adaptation to the environment so that they could survive, so that the ultraviolet light could get in and not adversely affect the calcium metabolism, so their bones would stay strong. So because of the cold air, the nose narrowed because, so they wouldn't breathe as much cold air in. Uh, the hair, our hair was tightly curled in Africa, but their hair had to be loosened so that they could get more sunlight in. So those were some of the mutations, and this is not something that science argues with. These are established facts that are accepted. What Dr. Diop did, though, he said that not only did they undergo these physical mutations, they underwent social, cultural mutations so that they became more materialistic because they were struggling. They became more aggressive, more antagonistic because they were struggling to survive. So instead of a cooperative spirit, they developed, I'm going to take yours. They devalued women because women were physically weaker and were seen as a drag on the group, to the extent that um, in some cases when girls were born, they would just leave them out because they saw them as a drag on the group, and they called it exposure. They would leave the girl babies to be eaten by the animals, to be killed in the environment. So that is the type of roots that Western society has, and so we can say that we can say that it's crazy, but it's like I don't talk about white supremacy because I don't believe in it. I call it white psychopathic narcissistic pseudo supremacy, because
Right.
it's based in sickness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just shorten it and I call it pseudo white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I
Mm-hmm.
guess being in medical, I gotta.
You have to make sure it's correct.
No, I just add that other stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The words that most of us don't understand because we're not as versed as you are. If it's okay, Brother Hamptoni, I want to pivot to the gastroenterologist that's sitting before us. Our good friend Dr. Brown is also a gastroenterologist, and he keeps it real. Dr. Brown is also a holistic practitioner, so he kind of pushes away from the allopathic procedures that are so prevalent. But I think Dr. Gallman might have his feet in both ponds, so to speak, just based on his awareness. But I want to talk about the connection between our dysfunction and diet, and look at how the digestive process supports our health. You know, they talk about the gut biome, and then you look at what happens through that process, and it's really interesting, Dr. Gallman. I go to the store sometimes, and I'll walk out with a bag that's full, and it weighs about 20 or 30 pounds, and then I'm thinking in my head, all of this stuff has to go through me, all of that weight, all that processing. And we live in a very consumer oriented society. So it's always eat, 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 eat. But then when you look at the things that restore our health, you see that fasting is one of those things that do it. And then you look at the fact that so much of what we eat is not nutritionally dense, but we still have to process it, and it takes its toll on our bodies because of the amount of energy that has to be expended in order to push that through. Dr. Layla Africa talked about us being like food processors. So what I'm getting to is, and what I'm curious about is, what kinds of things can we consume that will be beneficial to our digestive process and perhaps help us to eliminate some of the dysfunction that we are experiencing because of the processed and non-nutritive food that we're eating.
uh, Actually, um, it's real simple. Less meat, more fiber, and no and fewer carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
And it's as simple as that. We eat too many sweets, too much sugar. Um, we eat too much meat, and the meat tends to create a myriad of problems uh, in various systems, not just the GI system, but eating too much meat can clog up your heart. It can do all kind of things, and I think, and it's relatively simple. However, we have become, what's the word that I want to use? We become slaves to our taste buds,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
and so often, you know, I have a little cousin. Well, she's not little; she's in her 50s, but um, and she's very well known in hip hop circles and in music circles. She's out of New York, and she is just a sweetaholic. She just and now she exercises a lot, so she's not overweight, but she eats so much sweets, and that's part of her bio. She says she eats too much sweets. Um, I think the fact that she's active
That's
is,
what's keeping
is
them together.
probably helping her.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it gets to this whole idea of of soul food. And one of the things that I say, soul food was a survival diet. Uh, we ate chitlins because that's all we had to eat, and we were able to make it filling. And even though it didn't have all the nutrition that we needed, we supplemented that with what we could. So fried foods, all of this sugar, those were survival diets.
Mhm.
And it bothers me that we now see it as delicacy. I'm going to this soul food restaurant, and I'm guilty. I grew up on that, and I would think that it's probably more prominent in the South than it is uh, in the North or the Midwest. I don't know,
Mhm.
um, but it's unfortunate that we look upon it as a delicacy,
Mhm.
because I think that personally I'm a pescatarian,
Mhm.
but I still eat too much starch. I don't eat sweets, but I eat a lot of rice. I eat a lot of potatoes.
Right, right, right.
Um,
Mhm.
uh, I think that you hit on something extremely important, Brother Vince. I think that a whole lot of the illnesses and the diseases that I'm confronting with in the practice of gastroenterology are directly related to diet.
Mhm.
Directly.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
um, I agree. I think that if we were to eat right, not only would our life expectancy significantly increase, but our morbidity or the illnesses would significantly decrease also.
Mm.
Let me say one. Go ahead.
Just one just I
Mhm.
just want to make a distinction in terms of the carbohydrates, because the carbohydrates, as I understand it, are important because they're a source of energy, but you have simple carbs and you have complex carbs. So are there carbs that we should be relying on, simple or complex? How do we get that balance that we need? Because we got to have carbs, we got to have fat, and we got to have protein.
Yeah, you have to. But again, you can get that in a reasonable diet. Um, uh, s- Simple carbs versus complex carbs. Obviously, complex carbs are harder to break down, so they stick with you, and they end up being turned into fat. Uh,
Mhm.
so, yes, those things are necessary, but a good diet will contain all those things.
Mhm. And
So,
system.
so we don't. But the problem is that we overdo it.
Mhm.
That is the
Mhm.
problem. Uh, people who eat and they gotta have dessert, gotta
Mhm.
have something sweet.
Right,
You
right.
know, I
Mhm.
think that all those things are culprits in what we do to ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah, I was Doc, your thoughts on um geography as it deals with the human body. Since we kind of touched on that, we're talking about food because it's a shame that we're in 2025 and we're still talking about what we should eat and what we shouldn't eat. We should have that down packed by now, I would think. But I remember having a conversation with Doc Brown one time, and we was talking about geography and how you may or may not be able to talk about it, and I'm not sure, but how does geography play a part in the food that you eat, your actual location on the planet, and things of that nature? Do your body kind of like in the ice age kind of uh, uh, metamorphosize a little bit into that particular environment so you can intake those particular foods in that particular region? Or if melanated dominated people shouldn't be in this particular region, and or should you eat the food that's comparable to the region that you're living in, or something to that nature?
That's a good question. I, let me first say I'm not sure I know the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'll take a stab at it. I suspect that there is some truth to that. I do know that uh, the availability of certain foods is greater in some areas than in others, so that becomes a staple of that
Mm-hmm.
area. And then you have
Mm-hmm.
when you deal with geography. Um, have, do you drink milk?
No, not regular milk. No, not
Okay.
from
Are
cow.
you lactose intolerant?
Yes,
I
lactose intolerant.
Okay. Now,
I don't think I am personally, but I still don't drink milk.
it's fascinating to me, and this gives an idea of how, and this is another conversation we can have on. I think you alluded to it earlier, Brother Hamptonio, about how things have been changed, definitions have been altered. But
Mm-hmm.
something as simple as lactose intolerance is painted as a disorder. Yet the overwhelming majority of the world's population do not have the ability to fully digest lactose. So
Wow.
if 80 to 90% of the world does not have it, why are you going to call it abnormal? Just
Okay.
because just because people that we now classify as white are not lactose intolerant, they see that they have defined that is,
Mm-hmm.
and Brother Antonio, you've called my phone, so you know my message. Power is the ability to define reality and have
Mm-hmm.
other people respond to your definition as if it's their definition.
Mm-hmm.
So now we go through life seeing uh, lactose intolerant. Now, how often as abnormal? So how often, if we extrapolate that to other areas of life, you know, we really need to step back and look at some of the opinions that we have. And
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned religion earlier, and I look at religion specifically because this is a religion that was Christianity is a religion that was given to us by the people who were enslaving us, raping us, kidnapping us, human trafficking in us, and they told us that what we were doing wasn't right. They had the only right way, and we bought into it. And I know one one young woman actually I said one thing to her and she just made the get thee away from me Satan. I told her if your ancestors had not been slaves you wouldn't be Christian
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because it was forced upon us.
Mm-hmm.
um, they started you know and at some point I'd like for us to talk about this whole concept of race.
Mm-hmm.
uh, I don't think we have the time now, but
Mm-hmm.
that is a whole conversation. This whole concept of race.
Well, Dr. Gallman, I'm really tempted to extend the show today because what we're talking about is so important, and I can see Galen, McKinney, and the others at 4 o'clock some other time. But you hit on something that I really think needs to be explored when you talked about this idea of Christianity not necessarily being for us. And when you look at the history of it as it has come to us as a result of what happened in 325 AD and the fact that those ancient concepts and principles were altered to push us away from our divinity and push us away from our connection with God, what I'm learning is that the Christ example was not one to be followed, but it was one to be embodied. In other words, it wasn't about following Christ, it was about being Christ. But because it was given to us the way that it was given to us, we externalize Christ in us, and then we go through intermediaries to make that connection. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Absolutely, yes,
Mm-hmm.
sir. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there have been through the years European writers who have touched upon this. You had Anacalypsis was one. There's Kersey Graves wrote a book called The World's 16 Crucified Saviors.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go back, in almost every allegory that you can find in the Christian Bible had its origins in ancient Kemet.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be proven. Probably um uh I'm trying to think of his name. The European who wrote 3 volumes, Ancient Egypt, Light of the World,
Gerald Massey.
Gerald Massey.
Mm-hmm.
Gerald Massey actually went into it, and one of the people who has, well, two of the people who have explored it, I think, very well are Charles Finch,
My
Dr.
boy.
Charles Finch, and his Echoes of the Old Dark Land.
Mm-hmm.
The 6 essays, and one essay is the African origins of the Old Testament, and the other one is African origins of the New Testament. But Tony Browder,
Mm-hmm.
in his Nile Valley Contributions to Civilizations, gives some very concrete examples of how ancient Kemet contributed directly. And
Mm-hmm.
some years ago, this is probably 40, maybe 50 years ago, there was a conference put on by a Catholic organization. Um, and the name of it was Egypt, the Missing Hyphen in the Judeo-Christian Tradition. And they had a group of speakers, but the one speaker that I heard was Dr. Naeem Akbar, who really gave an excellent speech. And I have it somewhere on cassette tape, and I'm trying to find it so that I can try to digitize it and share it on online. But they recognized that, but they shut that down very quickly. They recognized that every you had ancient Kemet, and then you had the Habaru. Uh, the people talk about the great migration out of Egypt. What do they call it? When Moses led the people out of Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and not realizing that Moses was a very common name. It was you had
Yes.
Tutmosis, Jehudi Moses. You had
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
part of a common name in ancient in Kemet.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, and there was never, when you think about it, the Kemetic people recorded everything. They wrote everything. They wrote on walls. They wrote on tables. They wrote on chairs. They wrote on paper because they invented paper. But they ain't said nothing about no uh, great migration out of Egypt. They never mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
So even Jewish scholars have said it never happened.
Got to interrupt because we have just about 55 seconds left in our broadcast, but we're going to continue. I'm going to make the sacrifice, Dr. Gallman, because this is so beneficial to our listening audience.
Yeah,
just want to
Dr.
remind
you, have a couple minutes himself, though, but go ahead.
Yeah, you're listening to 360 Info Network right here on AM 1490 WERE. Our guest is Dr. Burnett Gallman, coming to us from South Carolina. He is a gastroenterologist, and he is also a researcher, historical researcher, and we are getting the benefit of his expansive knowledge today. Before we conclude, I just want to send a shout out to our engineer, Brother Tone Harley. You do it for us every week, brother, and we appreciate you. And we appreciate those of you who are listening. As always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day. Peace, y'all.
Peace.
All right, it's 12 o'clock noon straight up here in Cleveland, Ohio, where we are. Dr. Gallman is in South Carolina, and some of you are watching from other parts of the world. If you're watching us on YouTube, we would greatly appreciate a subscription, a thumbs up, a comment, whatever you want to contribute to the cause. You can go to the Journey with Hamptonio and catch this broadcast on his YouTube channel. You can also catch it on my YouTube channel, and you can catch it on the 360 Info Network Facebook page. So a lot of places you can go to pick up this great content. We're happy to do it for you. Brother Hamptonio, I'm pleased to report that I made it to 1,000.
Okay, all right, all right.
So
Okay,
maybe
good.
this can start paying for a brother.
Mhm.
But really excited about what we're able to do here. And all kidding aside, this is crucial for our community because they're getting information that they're not getting from mainstream media. We talk about truth, we talk about reality, and Brother Gallman talked earlier about power and the perception of reality as being power. We have to take the reins and we have to begin to define our own reality, because other than that, we will continue to be slaves and victims, and that's not who we are. I saw a video earlier in the week, and this European person asked a sister to name one thing that a black person had invented, and she couldn't think of
Mm,
anything. I'm like,
mm.
Oh,
what
You got to
country
be
did you
kidding
grow
me.
up in that you don't
Mm.
know all of the things that we, because without the things that we've invented, the world would not be the world that it is today. So for her to be so ignorant about that, it was just, I don't know, it was a little
Mind
off-putting.
boggling. Yeah.
But
Hmm.
but the critical issue is us taking responsibility for our education, because our education has been used as a tool against us and not for us. And if you want to comment, please do.
I say we, our ancestors, our parents and grandparents, sacrificed, demonstrated to send their children to their enemies to be educated. And what we're seeing now is the results of that education.
Mm.
And it's, what kind of education will your enemies give you? Those same enemies that made it illegal for you to learn how to read in the first place. Um, so, and you mentioned the media earlier, Brother Vince. I think that it's very, very important, very, very important that not only do people support uh, enterprises like this, but also if you know of any black media, black newspaper, subscribe to it, because most black newspapers are hurting for money, and they're existing on a shoestring budget. And I actually subscribe to black newspapers. I think it's 3 or 4 black newspapers from all over the country. Just you know, and because I write for one, and it's called the Community Times. It's based in Florence, South Carolina, and they put out issues in the PD area of South Carolina, which is near Florence, in the Low Country near Charleston, and in what we call the Up Country near Greenville. And I think that it's important, even though a lot of the news is local. Um, I think we waste more money on junk. Sacrifice a trip to McDonald's in order to support a black newspaper.
Mm.
Most of those subscriptions are maybe $12, $15 a month at the most, usually less. And that's one
Mm.
trip a month to McDonald's.
It-
And
it-
not only will you be supporting the black business, but your body will love you,
yeah.
and your confidence in your life. Uh, you remember, speaking of McDonald's, you remember that documentary that guy did called Supersize Me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So I mean as examples. So I encourage everyone to please support black media, especially now that white media is becoming more naked in their lying about us, or they are malignantly ignoring us.
Mhm.
I think that's
It's,
it's very
see,
important.
just quick. I got I have a problem with us at times, and the frustration that that I go through, and one that, just like you said, y'all talked about, you eventually said that the woman couldn't even name one thing that, contributions that we done, but it kills me about, you know we people 40, I mean 50, 60 years old, in the substance abuse arena. What they always say, before healing can take place, you first got to recognize you have a problem, and what's going on right now, as we talk to people today, even, you know and all the stuff that is going on all over the globe at this point, you could talk to some people and you don't see no urgency in them at all about, oh, I need to prepare myself. Something might be going down with this, that, and other. Shoot, I might have to leave this doggone country. Who don't know? Who knows? And they are touching a little bit into Donald Trump and seeing how it's affected Constitution. And, he's doing what he's doing to the Constitution, but I don't see no other plan or no strategy that they may be talking about in Bureau. Seem like they're just willing to just sit here and and just go along. And wrapping this up, of what I'm trying to say is that by you being that old, you should just by observation, you should be saying, okay, this man is all about money. He don't, everywhere he went, he don't lied, stole, killed. How can I trust him to even take care of the meat or the food, the thing? We should be looking for alternatives and saying, okay, hey, I'm a grown person now. Now I can see. I'm supposed to be free and able to read and see things and things of that nature. But they still seem like they're operating in, a lot of them is operating in darkness. How could you trust this man with the track record that you got here with anything? And we still absorbing and still romanticizing all his ideology, all his worldview, his take on it, everything, education and everything, and we still just romanticize and sucking it all up, and not looking for any other alternatives, and believing in this one way that he has shown us. I don't understand that any educated person can look at this and look at our situation and go along with the situation, with our present conditions in this country. Like Malcolm said, if you ain't an angry black man, then something's wrong with you. So it just baffles me, that we can just be that involved into the system and don't and just go along. I'll be looking for any kind of alternative. One of my analogies is saying that we should be treating this European like you would treat a crackhead. Anything he bring you, you should be looking at it with a critical eye and say, okay, what you got going on now? What kind of trick bag you trying to put me in now? That's how we should approach him.
And what you just described is, to me, the classic observation of what a cult is, and a cult has several characteristics: a strong, charismatic leader, and doctrine that cannot be uh, defied, and absolute obedience, and not thinking.
Mhm.
Um, and basically, if you look at most of the cults in the history, in especially recent history, um, starting with Hitler and the Nazis, and you talk about Jim Jones, um, it's all the same, and the results pretty much are the same. Great loss of life. So um, some of the comedians do these little things on Instagram and Facebook where they'll go. I saw one the other day where this woman was interviewing this various Trump supporters, and they were saying, but what they would do is they would quote Trump and say Biden said it, and they were ready to come down on Biden. You know, he's old, he's not in his right mind. And then the interviewer would say, "Oh, I made a mistake. Biden didn't say it. Trump said that." Then they start making excuses,
Mm-hmm.
and that's classic. It's unfortunate. I tend to agree with the brilliant brother Greg Carr. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're at the end of the United States as,
Mm-hmm.
as we've known it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the fear that I have is what's going to come in its wake.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that they were saying is that in ancient Germany is that people who were not Nazis, people who did not believe in Nazism, didn't say anything. They were quiet. They were not active. They didn't do anything. So, and that's what's happening now. I see a few people that are saying something, but it seems to be disjointed and unorganized. And if there's going to be anything, uh, it can't be us. We're not going to be able to make that much of a difference, I don't think.
Well, I think part of the issue is that we expend a lot of energy reacting to things that are being done.
Yes.
And we don't spend enough time being proactive in doing the things that will benefit us. You know, it's just like what we were saying earlier about how the education system doesn't suit us. Well, when does the light bulb go on to tell you that you need to be responsible for your education? You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm thinking of the saying, physician, heal thyself. You
Mm-hmm.
heal yourself because you have acquired the knowledge of yourself and your physiology that will enable you to do that. But we live in a lazy society. So when something happens, we just want to go somewhere and have somebody give us a pill so we can keep on with our daily lives. And the pill is not a substitute for good health. The pill is just a coping mechanism because you haven't addressed the underlying cause that caused that pain or discomfort in the first place. You know, you put a band-aid on and you keep going, and so when does anything ever change if you don't? It's that classic definition of insanity. You keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result. So when do we say, okay, well, we have to educate ourselves? Dr. Gallman, I'm sure that when you were growing up, there was a certain sense on the part of your teachers, because you probably had Black teachers. You may have had or may not. But when you look at what's going on right now, most of the teachers aren't like us. And because of that, they may lack a certain sense of, going back to that word, compassion. They may lack a certain sense of compassion, and they lack an awareness of history to give us the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was in high school, my senior history class, I'm looking at this textbook and I'm flipping through the pages and I don't see us anywhere. And I'm like, wait. And so I asked the teacher, basically, where are we at? And the teacher said, I can't tell you because I don't know. They didn't teach me that. So he couldn't teach me what he wasn't taught. And that just goes back to the importance of us teaching ourselves. I was blessed to have a father and a mother who had an interest in Black history. So when I grew up, I had a certain sense of identity because they passed that along to us. Both my mother and my father went to college. But you have a lot of parents that never got that far with it. They don't have the wheelhouse to teach you history because they're stuck in that survival mentality, and they concerned about how to pay the bill and not necessarily telling you who John Henry Clark was or Sheikh Anta Diop was or what Africa is to us. You know, we watched the Tarzan movies and we got brainwashed into thinking that that's what Africa is, and that's the exact opposite of what it is. Only 5 to 15% of Africa is jungle. But you have this idea in your head that we swinging on vines and we walking around naked and all these other kinds of things. So our perception of history and our perception of reality has been disfigured by the people who bring it to us. And that's why we have to say we're going to take control. We're going to teach our children who and what they are so that they can be productive and they can advance us. So as what's happening in Burkina Faso is happening right now, they can say, okay, we're going to push back on the system of exploitation that you've given us over all these years. We're going to switch things around so that you can pay us what we need to be paid for the things that we are going to allow you to use. So that's a convoluted way of saying that we have to start taking responsibility for our perception of reality. But if we don't, we'll continue to be slaves. And let's face it, folks, the reality of America and the world financial system is that everybody is slaves to debt because the financial system is based on debt. And until you eliminate all your debt, you're a slave to it. I mean, think of how many medical students are still paying, or how many doctors are still paying the cost of their education because they took out loans. And when they transition, that debt goes to those who come after them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm sorry, brothers. I'm going to have to.
I know you got to go. Yeah,
go. But what you say is so correct. And one of the things, and I forget which one of my teachers used to say this, but it seems like it was Dr. Clark who said that keeping you in survival mode is a tactic, it's a strategy. Because as long as you are scrambling to survive, you can't aspire to higher knowledge.
Absolutely.
Your nose is to the fire. And that's and that remains true. And I think if things continue going the way they are in this country, it's going to become even truer.
I agree. Well, Doc, again, I know you got your little Saturday meetings that you still doing the Saturday meetings.
Yeah, we are. But today, today my wife has marshaled me in some honeydews.
Oh, okay.
And as a matter of fact, she just texted me and said, "Hurry up
and bring your behind on." No problem. Well, we don't want to get you in trouble, Doc, with all that. So, but again, we'll have you back on, and maybe we can deal with that race piece that you talked about.
I'd love to. Yeah,
and then whatever comes up.
Anytime I can do this, man, I enjoy chopping it up with you brothers.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, appreciate you, bro. Thank you. All right now.
All right. That's Dr. Burnett Gallman. Thanks to you for being with us today, and we'll look forward to that conversation of race when it comes up. Peace and blessings, my brother.
Peace and blessings, my brother. Yes, sir. Yeah. Vincent, like I said, what you said, the last comment you said, that's why I go back and saying, I mean, just about observation, that reality never crossed your mind of come on, you still got grown people that's like you say, is wondering, do they got houses and supermarkets and all this old stuff? Come on, you got the internet, you got, come on, man. And we still, my point is, how can you still let this man dictate your worldview when he has a track record and a history as the way he does? Now, somebody 20, 30, 18, that years old, okay, you might not be subject to, nobody never pulled your coattail yet and awaken you to certain things. But you 50, 60 years old, and you never come to this point like, you know what, I can't trust this dude. This dude got a track record of experimenting on you, messing with the food, messing with the air, messing with everything. Is, you know, you should have a certain type of pushback from this system, and most folks are still romanticizing, love it to death. This ain't looking for nothing else or another way of doing anything, man. And it just baffles me that you can be a grown person, and grown of male or female, and never ask yourself the question: how come there's no black presence in the Bible? How come, you know, you can't differentiate between an ancestor and an angel, which is the same doggone thing, but you're gonna push back on that references, that type of references and vernacular that you use to express what you're trying to say, and it's a black thing. You know, it just baffles me, man. That, come on,
Yeah.
brother, you living under a rock or what? You know?
Well, I think the critical issue is the absence of critical thought.
Yes, absolutely.
We're not taught to be thinkers. I mean, if you look at the way the education system is designed, it's based on you remembering stuff and giving it back. It's not about you thinking about the implications of the information that you're given. They just give it to you and you give it back. When I was at Kent, Dr. Edward Crosby taught something called the banking concept of education. And that one class scarred me, because after I took that class, I had absolutely no desire to pursue an additional degree because I understood what the game was. You know, and then when you look at it now, it's like what we were talking about a few moments ago. You go to school and you rack up all this debt to get your education that provides no guarantees of employment. And you spend the rest of your life paying down that debt. That's a scam to me. Why do we even have to pay for education? There was a time when they promoted education. There was a time when, you know, you could get scholarships and so forth, and they would do what was necessary to get you through that process. But now it's purely exploitation. And the crisis that we're facing in this state and other states is that we have too many colleges and not enough students. So now the colleges are suffering. I had a conversation with someone who wants to have a conversation about Senate Bill 1, and we might do it next weekend. I'm not sure yet. But there are some folks who want to talk about that Senate bill, because what they've done is they've used that Senate bill to take DE&I and all matters of Black folk out of higher education, but now they want to bring it down to the high school level. You know, and so the question in my mind to the person who says we should talk about this, the question in my mind is, well, what can we do? You know, it's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing to come up with some strategies to deal with it. But, you know, all roads lead back to us being responsible for our own education, because I say this all the time. You can't expect your oppressor to educate you to freedom.
You can't do it.
The nature
now,
of
see, now, hold on, Vince. Now, see that. Okay, that's a basic critical analysis question that you should think about. That's what I'm saying. So something as basic as that, you can't get from most folks. It seems like to me. Now, I may be wrong. Maybe they think about it and don't act on it. But that's just, why would you think that this man would do anything, as far as education is concerned, give you something to liberate yourself from him? Do you think he ever teach you anything that would liberate you from him, from this condition that you're in? That's what I'm saying. Observation, simple, critical analysis on something, and we not getting it from our folks, man. That's what I'm saying. Those kind of things like that just blows me away, man.
Yeah. Well, Hamptonio, you're a Virgo. And the nature of Virgo is critical and analytical thought. So it's something that comes natural to you. But when you look at other parts of our population, we're not taught to think. It's just like that young person who's sitting in the pew at church, hearing all these things and having questions. And they're natural questions because a
Yeah.
child is inquisitive and they want to know the truth. They want to understand things.
Mm-hmm.
And they ask the question and they're told, shut up, sit down, and just accept what you're being told. So that's not fostering critical thought. The child is being natural and questioning things. So you mean to tell me that 6 people got all these animals on this ship and they were out for 40 days and 40 nights, and you're thinking about, how did they do that? But you're not dealing with the fact that it is a story and it's not necessarily something that really happened, but you're being taught that it really happened. I mean, when you look at the way we're taught things, this is a thought that I had the other day about how the authors of the books of the New Testament, those books were written sometime after the fact. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Years.
So I remember Ray Hagan's doing a lecture on the differences in the crucifixion story, the resurrection story. How you could have 3 different books and each one of them gives you a different version. Well, if them folks weren't there at the time, what they're repeating is something that they heard.
Yeah.
And so if you put 10 people in a circle and you say something to one person and have them pass it down, by the time it comes back to that person, it's not the same thing. So I'm just thinking, how could all of those 3 different versions of the resurrection story, how could they be different but all true?
It's a book called who lays that out real good is a book called the book that the church don't want you to read. I suggest a lot of the Christians get that book there. And in that book, he lays out those particular stories that you're talking about. And I want to say Matthew's, he put money on the line that if anybody can give me the chronological order of the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus Christ. What happened first? What happened second? What happened third? He put money on the line, just like Ray Higgins put money on the line on show me the bodies, where the bodies was buried. He do a lecture called The Verdict is In. And that one I thought was profound. Show me the bodies. Where the bodies are any of these characters at? You know what I mean? Yeah. So with all that being said, yes, and it's laid out, and that's why I say again that we need to really, really, do an investigation of that whole thing, and even the whole thing about the whole after that was taking place, and they put that particular information together in the Bible. Then you had about 800 years of dark ages. You know what I'm trying to say? Where the light was totally turned out, far as information and things like that. You know what I mean? And then they come up and conjure up in 15 something and in 1611, wrote the King James Bible, and here it is for you.
Yes.
I would think by now that we really understand who we are cohabitating with. But I think we still don't get the gist of who we are cohabitating with, because we're not good stewards of history and understanding history. How can you know the game and play? How can you play the game if you don't know the game?
Right.
So you're going right along with every narrative. And I can see if you was following somebody down the track of and they was giving you good information that worked for you in your best interest. But since America come about, this man has had his foot on your neck for every step of the way. And some of those truths are just coming out about some of the inhumane things that has been done to you. So how could you take anything that you receive in here in this narrative and take it to heart and abide by it and take your family, your children, and everybody that you know down this same drain, this same path of destruction, self-destruction for yourself. And in closing, I would say with that African proverb, it's bad not to know, but it's worse not to want to know.
Yeah, that's so true. And, in so many different ways, being involved in situations where you're bringing the truth to people and they do this.
Oh, yeah. La, 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 la.
You say you need to step away from them French fries that got 17 ingredients. No, they taste too good. I can't do that, bruh. You need to back off from eating that birthday cake with all that sugar and the eggs and the milk and all that stuff that's not really good for you. Nah, I like the cake. I like the cake. That's what we do.
Christmas.
We don't want to know. I was thinking earlier when Dr. Gallman was talking about how we wrote everything down. Like all the information is there, but we don't want to deal with it. We don't even want to embrace and understand it. But if we embrace and understand it, then we get a clue as to who and what we are. But there's always this idea that if we just go along with what we're told, everything eventually is going to be all right. But they keep proving themselves. And here's the thing. This is what really resonated with me. Dr. Gallman told you why they are the way they are. He told you that. He told you about the adaptation and the effect that it had on their mentality and put them in a mindset that they just go out and tear everything up. And I remember history, being in those history classes and listening to stories about the Goths and the Visigoths and the Saxons and all these European folks and Alexander the Great and all these folks who their whole agenda was going out and tearing stuff up and conquering stuff and taking stuff. They told you who they were.
Yes, right.
And at the same time, they didn't tell you anything about Mansa Musa. They didn't tell you anything about Nzinga. They didn't tell you anything about Kwame Nkrumah or any of those other folks who were doing things that we need to know about. But what they do is they give you the information that perpetuates a mindset of victimhood and subservience so that you see yourself as lesser than and accept the mantle that is placed upon you. And all I'm saying is, folks, you have to wake up to understand who and what you are and what we are capable of. And we don't have to be under somebody's foot. That ain't what it's about. It's about us standing up and getting something off our backs so that we can move forward in a way that benefits us. And, not to be exploited, not to be pimped, because that's what's happening. We getting pimped. Don't nobody know nothing about the straw man. Don't know nobody knowing anything about the bonds that are on us. Don't nobody know about the fact that you shouldn't be paying those bills the way you're paying them now because there are other ways to do it. Nobody's talking about the fact that when we drive up and down these streets, we're not in commercial purposes and we shouldn't be hauled into them places.
No driver's license.
All of that. We don't know. They keep us in the dark about it, and we just, write the check. We trade our time for money. And at the same time, they take our money, they buy things that make money, they figure out ways that they don't have to be taxed on the money that they're making from the money that made money, and then they just move forward.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely, man. I mean, it's almost like this. Let me bring it home to them, and I'm sure they can relate to this. It seems like most things that like apprentice classes or something like that, we always be the late one to know some stuff like that. It'd be almost like, oh, you gotta sign your kids up today. This is the last day for this electrical apprentice class. You know what I mean? They always know it was something came on. It has to be research. I'm just repeating what I heard. I didn't research it yet, but I can believe it. the lady came on talking about how you can take a piece of land, and if you like bury your parents, or you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No
Okay,
property tax.
no property tax. They can't take the property away from you, or none of that stuff. And I'm like, how long they knew that? That's why you see some of the houses in the South, mama's bed right here, papa's bed. They gonna have that land. It's probably some way of classifying your land a certain kind of way as some kind of sub cemetery or something, and they can't take your property away from you. You don't pay taxes or whatever.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is loopholes. They got their own. They sure can keep a secret amongst themselves. That's for doggone sure, because we just be finding out those, and then what happens when we do find it? It's the other African proverb to say. You said, once the fool has learned the game, the players have dispersed. They change the game. When we do learn, then they start manipulating and the whole rule of thumb, and now it changes on you. Once you find. So it just amazed me how over and over again you start finding out new things that you can do. Now we just not understanding about the trust and putting all your assets in the trust. You know what I mean? So you can keep. It's just amazing, man.
And that's what they have been doing all along, protecting their stuff in a trust. But we don't know. And so bottom line, Brother Hamptonio, is we got to find somebody and pay somebody to set that up for us so that we can get the same protection. Because nobody's gonna give that knowledge away free.
Yeah, what they know, I can definitely keep it amongst themselves. Even like I sold real estate way back. What was a little about 20 some years ago. And that's when I found out about the whole credit piece. How white folks would take their kids and put them on their credit card to build their credit up. You know what I mean? And I was like, wow, how they do it, and also that how you can take $1,000 and put it in the bank and borrow against that $1,000 and pay the $1,000 that you borrowed back in increments, and you will have several credit lines. You see what I'm saying? That's establishing another credit line. Go in there, if you got $1,000 sitting in there, put it in the bank, and then go borrow against the $1,000 and do it at 2 or 3 banks. Now you got 2 or 3 bank credits. You got a credit card that your mama put you on, and you setting your kids up for success in the future. Did we know that stuff 25, 35 years ago? No, we weren't doing it. Maybe it was a few of us doing it, but we weren't doing it. It's not in your favor. The system ain't set up for you. The system is set up for you to always be in survival mode, and them exploiting you and taking advantage of you. Just like they take advantage of all your talents, all your information. When you talk about invention, all your contributions that we have made to this country, all taking advantage. That's why you have to break out of the cycle, people. Start thinking and reading. And when somebody does come to you with another way of doing some stuff, look at it, research it. Because what's happening right now, it's not working for you, and it's not working for your future generations.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. I'm gonna close on this point. When you talk about change, and y'all gonna hear me talk about this ad infinitum, because you need to know. But they are changing the world's financial system.
Oh, yeah.
They're changing the way money moves. They found new ways to move money even faster so that they can make even more money. And if you don't catch on to what they're doing, you're going to get left in the dust. I had a really interesting conversation with a state representative the other day, and I was telling him about cryptocurrency and how the Democrats have approached it. And now you see this paradigm shift taking place. They are digitizing the US dollar. So you gonna go places and you can't use a paper bill. They don't accept cash, and they're doing that to affect us. So there are plenty of other currencies that you can start using right now that aren't going to evaporate the way the US dollar is. So it behooves us, to use that word, it behooves us to know what's going on, to understand what's going on, and to take advantage of what's going on, because right now we have an opportunity to create intergenerational wealth that can be passed down. If you know how to play the game. It's all about knowing how to play the game. So, you know, after I had the conversation, it was obvious to him that our community needs to have an education about this,
For
so
sure.
that they understand what they are capable of doing. And it's not as daunting as one would think. It's a process like anything else. You sign up for health insurance, you go through a process. You get a new job, you go through a process. Anything that you do in life is going to involve some type of an educative process. So this is another one of those things that you learn about it, you execute it, and you take advantage of it. And don't think, well, just because I can't understand it, I can't participate. Some things you got to learn as you're going through the process. But you can't sit on the sidelines while they do everything that they can to take everything away from you. So the game is to create the trust, to put your assets in the trust so that you escape any liability for it. There are different tax advantages to having your stuff in a trust, because look, the nature of this system is to tax folks to death. You know, you get money and then you give it back. You know, you get taxed several times, and that, but they designed the system specifically to execute that plan. And if you don't have an understanding of how to navigate it, you will continue to be exploited by it.
And in closing, this system is made is works in harmony or at the best interest of businesses, not an individual. An individual gets gets all the crap. You know what I mean? As far as your taxes and everything else. Become a LLC or become a business, and that's where your advantages of the system comes to you at that point. You know, you're being played if you just still work out here as an individual. You know, this is how they work the system. You know, so
Yeah.
with that being said,
a lot to unpack today. We got some real gems from Dr. Gallman, and I trust that you will take the time to review this recording and get out of it what you will. And it is, again, it's incumbent upon us to continue to bring you great content. So as always in Party, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day, y'all.
peace.
Peace.